in addition to what researchers claim. That's a major red flag. Wherever these GE mosquitoes have been introduced or about to be introduced, the human populations have not been consulted for their permission. It is all being done by government and corporate edict. It's human experimentation on a grand scale. There are concerns that if indeed the dengue-carrying mosquitoes are actually wiped out, the vacuum may be filled by another dengue carrier, the Asian tiger mosquito, which breeds much faster. Other than that, everything is perfect. Let's have a big parade and welcome genetically engineered mosquitoes to planet Earth. Back to the Zika virus. What is actually causing mothers to give birth to babies with very small heads and impaired brains? If this is indeed a recent phenomenon, I would start with a deep and very specific investigation of the genetically engineered mosquitoes that were recently released in Brazil to decimate the dengue fever mosquitoes. Then I would pay attention to a report like this from the Rio Times. Brazil shown to be largest global consumer of pesticides. The use of pesticides in Brazil grew more than 162% from 2000 to 2012, according to the latest report by the Brazilian Association of Collective Health, making the country the #1 consumer of pesticides in the world. According to the entity, the Brazilian agriculture sector purchased more than 823,000 tons of pesticides in 2012. The Abrasco report, titled An Alert of the Impacts of Pesticides on Health, was released last week in Rio de Janeiro. The report includes scientific studies, including data from the National Cancer Institute, that shows a direct link between the use of pesticides and health problems. A quote inside the report: "Not only are we using more pesticides, but we are using more powerful, stronger pesticides. We have been forced to import pesticides which were not even allowed in Brazil to combat pests which attack GM soybean and cotton plants. 22 of the main active ingredients used in pesticides in Brazil today have been banned in most other countries." How about an in-depth investigation on the ground, probing the connection between these pesticides and birth defects? Or is it better for the chosen few to use a virus as a false cover story in order to explain away horrendous damage from what amounts to chemical warfare? Try this study, published in Environmental Health Perspectives on July 1st, 2011. Urinary biomarkers of prenatal atrazine exposure. Here's a quote referring to what is now being called a prime Zika effect. The presence versus absence of quantifiable levels of the pesticide atrazine, or a specific atrazine metabolite, was associated with fetal growth restriction and small head circumference. Head circumference was also inversely associated with the presence of the herbicide metachlor. Getting the picture? Of course, both atrazine and metachlor pesticides are used in Brazil. Why is this connection to birth defects being overlooked? If this is still a serious question in this day and age, and if the answers aren't obvious, the questioner just arrived from Pluto. I have walked the path of making these connections since 1987. The covert op is played exactly like the old shell game. Look here, don't look there. This is important. That means nothing. Tons and tons of various pesticides and other poisonous chemicals, but forget that. It's all because of a virus. A virus is the best false cover story ever invented. Thank you, John Rappaport.
I thought it was really important that Mindy read that whole article because it's got so much information in it. I'm going to try to skip through the rest of them. We're not going to bring you up to date on this. We're just going to give you some information that he's uncovered. He's done such great research that I really suggest you go to his website, nomorefakenews.com. In an article he wrote on January 30th called Genetically Engineered Mosquitoes Causing Smaller Heads, goes down, he says, I'll focus on one candidate, referring to the previous article, the genetically engineered GE mosquitoes, which have already been released in Brazil with the aim of decimating the population of mosquitoes that carry dengue fever, Zika, yellow fever, and chikungunya. First of all, the ominously GE mosquitoes released in the same area of Brazil where now most of the birth defects are being reported. It's called a clue. But who is deeply investigating it? No one in official circles. This is akin to saying, well, we just toured the war-torn city. Of course, last week we bombed it, but that couldn't possibly account for the destruction. The company releasing the GE mosquitoes, Oxitec, has grants for their experiments from Bill Gates. never a good sign. We refer to it, the Gates Foundation, as the Gates of Hell Foundation. Then he goes on and he talks about that company being owned by a company named Intrexon, and he employs the famous Dr. Sam Broder as the science vice president of the health sector. For 6 years, Broder was the director of the U.S. National Cancer Institute. He was instrumental in bringing the AIDS drug AZT to market. This previously failed chemotherapy drug was taken off the shelf and subjected to a scandal-ridden clinical trial, which resulted in the FDA approval. AZT is extremely toxic. It prevents human cells from replicating. It suppresses the immune system, the very system AIDS is supposed to be attacking. Other than that, no problem. I'm going to vary from the article a little bit. AZT was found to be the thing that, AZT in lifestyle is the thing that kills most people who are said to have AIDS, which is, I think, a fictitious disease. If you want to learn more about that, go to podcast 171, our interview with Beth Ellie. Now, how could a genetically engineered mosquito possibly affect humans in an adverse way? In our excellent activist post article, Zika Outbreak Epicenter, by the way, another way to keep up with this is activist post, Claire Burnish probes deeper into the, quote, science. She uncovers a little-known antibiotic connection and rips a gaping hole in the bland assurance that all is well. I strongly recommend reading it. Okay, and here's what she says. According to an unclassified document from the Trade and Agricultural Directorate Committee for Agriculture dated February 2015, Brazil is the third largest in global antimicrobial consumption in animal food production, meaning Brazil is the third in the world for the use of tetracycline in its food animals. The bottom line is the excreted tetracycline-laden waste of farm animals makes its way to the mosquito's breeding grounds. The genetically engineered male mosquito mates with the female, and far more offspring survive than were planned. Because the offspring in their larvae stage are feeding on tetracycline-tainted food and water, what qualities do these survivors carry? They bite humans. They are unknowns. In the history of the planet, they never existed before. Of course, we're told there's no problem. We're told that science has everything under control. And again, there's the nagging factor. The surge of horrendous birth defects in Brazil is happening in the same area where the GE mosquitoes were released. So we can relate this back to Oxitec, Bill Gates, and we go on to the next article.
Okay, from February 2nd, Zika, the biggest news service in America, absolutely clueless, by John Rappaport, of course. Okay, here we go. The Associated Press, AP, actually had its hands on the most explosive information possible. It reported that information in one stunning paragraph, and then it let that paragraph sit there like a dead corpse. It didn't do anything with it, just another day at the office. Connect the dots? See the implications? Never heard of it. To set this up, earlier in the story, AP revealed that Brazilian researchers had been rechecking their own work on Zika, and lo and behold, the original 4,180 cases of babies born with small heads and brain impairment, known as microcephaly, have turned out to be only 270. The Brazilians are going through more records, but so far the epidemic is not even close to an epidemic. The whole story that has spread all over the world was based on 4,180 cases. Without that number, there would have been no story. The AP piece then goes on to revelation number 2. This is even more stunning. Brazilian officials said that the babies with the defect, microcephaly, and their mothers are being tested to see if they had been infected. 6 of the 270 confirmed microcephaly cases were found to have the Zika virus. Hello, AP. Anyone home? Pick up. Don't you see what you're reporting? Don't you get it? So far, there are only 6 confirmed cases where a baby was born with microcephaly and also had the Zika virus. 6 cases. That's 6. And on that basis, health agencies and governments and media outlets all over the world are going crazy with warnings about the Zika virus. There is absolutely no evidence that Zika is causing anything here. 0 evidence. To even begin to think a virus is causing a condition, you must be able to show that the virus is present in the overwhelming majority of cases. That test has not been passed regarding Zika. It has utterly failed thus far. With this information, the Associated Press did nothing. They didn't press the experts. They didn't go anywhere. They didn't ask questions. They reported the bombshell and then they walked away. There's more. In their story, AP reaches out to a representative of the CDC. The subject is the number of microcephaly cases in the U.S. every year. They're doing a comparison between the U.S. and Brazil. AP states, the United States, with about 4 million births a year, has an estimated 2,500 cases of microcephaly a year, said Margaret Honan, a CDC epidemiologist. The reader of the article shrugs and moves on. There's only one problem. The CDC epidemiologist is dead wrong, or the AP misprinted the number, incompetently, or on purpose, who can say? I can't, because although I phoned the AP yesterday and left a message about the Agrarius error, they haven't gotten back to me. The AP error, you see, is this. It isn't 2,500 cases a year. It's 25,000, as in thousand. Every year in the U.S., and the conventional medical literature is very clear on this, there are 25,000 babies born with microcephaly. Why is this significant? Because obviously the Zika virus isn't the cause. In fact, the same literature states that any insult to the fetal brain during pregnancy can cause microcephaly. The mother falls down the stairs. She is severely malnourished. She ingests a poison, a street drug, a toxic medical drug. But if the AP in its story had published the actual number of microcephaly cases in the U.S. every year, 25,000, not 2,500, and compared it to the known number of microcephaly cases in Brazil, at this point 270, people might wake up and say, why is Brazil the focus? Why is the situation in Brazil causing a worldwide crisis? Are the World Health Organization and the CDC crazy? The answer to that last question, of course, is yes, but not just crazy. First and foremost, they're liars. Referring back to my original point about the Brazilian researchers finding only 270 confirmed cases of microcephaly, and then only 6 of those with the Zika virus, the World Health Organization has taken that information and spun it, and media outlets have followed suit. The 270 Brazilian cases of microcephaly are now coupled with the phrase, with evidence of an infection. Let me translate that clever piece of manipulation. The implication is all 270 cases also have the Zika virus. That's what infected means. Not just 6 cases with the virus. No, all 270 cases. A lie. So, all you women who are thinking about having a baby, don't. Don't get pregnant. Don't travel to 22 countries. Believe the authorities. They know what's best for you. They always do. Surely there's a global epidemic underway. Out of 9 billion people, 270 in Brazil have microcephaly, and 6 of those have the virus that could impair your baby. This makes perfect sense. Of course it does. If you have the thinking power of a rock, if you're committed to a life of abject fear based on nothing. Perhaps it's dawning on some of you that we're in the wrong business. We should be starting our own branch of Fear Incorporated. Our product would sell like crazy. Or we could just put the World Health Organization on our personal terror watch list. Thank you again, John Rappaport.
All right. In a February 2nd